I would like to talk to you today about a concept that has probably been in the minds of most people I've met in my life since the day I was born.
Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry.
Do you think it's possible
American makers of plowshares
to not have to live in fear of the nuclear fire anymore?
Make swords as well. But we can no longer risk
The current
emergency improvisation.
political forces upon the world suggest that
We have been compelled to create
there's a real need for it.
armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to
From the
this,
days of the Trinity test,
3.5 million men and women
we have advanced
are directly
science
engaged in the defense.
and mathematics
Now, this conjunction
to a point
of an
upon the
immense
world
military establishment and a
that we've
large
handed
arms industry is new
unrestricted
in the
control
American experiment.
of the resources of
The
our
total
planet
influence, economic,
to
political,
a group
even spiritual, is felt in every city,
that has no
every state,
loyalty to any
every
flag.
office of the federal government.
They are, in fact, the
We
military-industrial
recognize the
complex
need for this
that has been
Yet we must not
told
fail to comprehend its grave implications.
you need to slow down.
Resources and
But you
livelihood
don't.
are all involved. So is the very structure of our society.
Some of the greatest leaders throughout the history of man
Councils of government. We
has
must
warned us
guard
many
against
times.
the acquisition of
You must find a balance for the system.
Sought or unsought, by the military
Nations believe they need militaries.
The potential
Governments
for the
believe they must
national
protect
rise
their
of
people.
misplaced power exists and will persist. We must
I
never
agree with
let the
these
weight
things.
of this combination endanger our
Having wore a military uniform, I understand
We should take nothing for granted.
the need for protection
Only an alert,
from dangerous
knowledgeable
forces
citizen
in and upon a
can
society.
help the proper meshing of
However,
huge
based on
industrial and
a
military
mentality that said that
with our peaceful methods of
in my time,
so that security
I
and liberty
can remember
may prosper
reading
together.
the words of Kennedy, and I can remember listening firsthand to every president that I have witnessed in my life say that we need to slow down with these nuclear weapons. And I remember specifically my commander, Ronald Reagan. He believed we could stop it. And coming forward, looking through the political arena, if my ability to state my opinions are a right I retain as an American, people took advantage of that. And the people that took advantage of that, history already knows who they are. And history already knows that they came from the very same place that we all have been warned. It's a sword to plowshares mentality that must be maintained. And I believe that the financial leaders of the world, they are feverishly looking for a solution to that problem. I believe that the political leaders of the world absolutely want the solution. The problem is they have to ask the people that benefit the most from maintaining the fear as a matter of survival, therein causing what we have: gridlock, constant fear. Is fear a political tool? Sure. History of man says that more times than not, if you oppress a people, eventually your mentality emerges as the only mentality. The progression of man toward a greater understanding of human rights and a greater understanding of a need to slow down and listen to a collective voice can only be effectively demonstrated by a global effort. I'm not a politician. I'm nobody special. I'm just a guy that believes in what I'm doing. And because I was born in the United States, I believe that I've been afforded that right to stand beside what I believe. I believe we have forgotten what we know. Ten years ago, I walked into a door and I said, I want to build something. I think the guy that met me was just who he was. He was trying to help a United States veteran. And he did. He said to me, Bryant, if you really think you want to build this, I'm sure our government will help you. But it ain't easy, son. And there's a lot of people out there who probably don't want you to do it. And you probably ought to work with somebody else. I decided not to do that. I decided to be an independent because I understand as an analytic, if data flies across the screens and I can remember things throughout history in the advancement of science and technology that are key problems that other people are not able to address because of the political environments that they find themselves in, maybe I have a chance to introduce a new system. So that's where I'm at today. I'm sitting in front of this computer 13,000 miles away from my home, and I'm trying to understand how to speak to governments of countries. Having never done this thing before, I think it's only important that I record my thoughts and to explain the system the best way I know how, in the hopes that the commanders and the support systems from the industry of my country and the other countries involved will understand that we've done it a different way. Instead of coming and asking a government to give us tons and tons of money and give us tons and tons of power to do whatever we want to do, we decided that if you were going to be neutral and you had a position that says that you will in fact try to pay attention to the lessons that have been learned by people not doing what has been asked of the leaders before us. It's a simple mentality. If you hear something more than once, you probably should pay attention to it. The military-industrial machine does not have that luxury. They're trying to feed their people, and if you're trained to kill people, that's what you get paid to do. However, if you look at a way inside of the organizations, a soldier is the last one that wants to go into harm's way. So how do you fix that? We're all trying. We all do the best we can do. But not really. And the reason I can say that is because in the world I understand, if a president of a country says do something, normally it doesn't matter who that president is. If he is a leader of a sovereign nation, then by right of that office, it is normal that we are to defend this person. We have stopped doing this because we've allowed the elements of this multinational conglomerate known as the military-industrial complex to incite fear upon us. There again, it's based on a very simple mentality. If you must feed soldiers that are trained killers, and you must feed technicians that are trained to build weapons of war, how can you do anything except give them a job? The average human being understands this. It's not spoke about in political circles because most of the time the politicians in the world today are so busy trying to satisfy the requirements of the people that help them get into office that nothing gets done. So I ask you, with all of the problems in the world, is it possible for an independent group to offer a solution to eliminate the nuclear threat on the planet? Would a government support an independent test? Would the world support an independent test? We believe, based on reading the laws and the regulations and the history of the countries that are responsible for the creation of this threat upon humanity, which has unquestionably immersed mankind into a perpetual state of fear. I just don't know why we do that. We weren't taught to do that. Your parents didn't teach you to do that. Your government leaders in your town didn't teach you to do that. A lack of communications is the root of all problems. If you cannot speak, if you cannot understand, you cannot solve a problem. There's too many standards in the world. And I don't mean standards for human beings. There's not enough of those. There's too many standards for the machines that we use. And within those standards, we are lost. And we're a victim of hearsay. And we're a victim of our own fear. If I've learned anything in my life, I learned not to be afraid of who you are and what you believe and what you think your capabilities are. I am a technical person. I'm self-trained, but I got my base of information from a military structure that taught me, if you know something, defend it. And always do the right thing, even if you lose your life for it. On April the 4th of 2009, President Obama absolutely proposed nuclear abolition. He set it as a new strategic goal for U.S. foreign policy. He called to American leadership for all states. And then the academic world took over. The academic world that is supported by the military-industrial complex. They've buried themselves into our universities, and they alter the mindsets of our children. People suggest that these things are done by banks and secret organizations and all of this type of thing. For me, I simply understand, if you want to know the world, just believe everything anybody tells you, because it's probably true. However, I go back to the diverse, overbearing demands of too many system regulations. We're so smart and we're so complicated that we can't talk, we can't give people clean water, we can't give them good food, we can't give them a good house, we can't give them a good job. And then we say, stop being stupid. If a man's hungry, he's dangerous. If a man's child needs medical care, he's dangerous. What will he do? He will do what he must do. Why are these environments in a civilized society that promotes global prosperity? Are these words that we say real? I don't know. I've never seen them. All I know is that as an independent, I worked 22 years of my life on a single problem, and I would like you to look at it. The name of the system that we are proposing is in fact a global independent self-funded systems integration test. It's the name I gave it, because that's exactly what it is. It's nothing subjective, it's nothing convoluted, it's nothing that you can hide in some nomenclature in some budget somewhere. It's absolutely what it is. It's a group of independents standing up saying, look, we got our own money, we've built a system, we simply want you to review this. What do we require to do this? We need paper, according to the private funding groups that have given us our money. We simply need paper to prove that we have authorization to complete this test. A review of the laws and the regulations within the countries that will be part of this test, we understand it's already defended, and it's defended heavily. They always invite independent technology demonstrations. And most of the time they will even pay for them. The reason we decided not to take government funding as part of an integration test that is global is that we could maintain our neutrality and we could not be affected by the vast political powers on the planet, that we could not be affected by the military-industrial complex. We have moved within these systems as independents, and we've met with a very diverse range of opinions and technical information, and we've been lucky. We've been lucky to a point that we found people that absolutely believe in what we're trying to do, and they've tried to help us. And of course, me being the person I am, it's more difficult. I'm only one human being. I've chose to do this the hard way for a reason. Commanders and leaders, they don't get to see the field. They want to. Sometimes they get to walk out among the people, but because of this perpetual fear, the leaders in the world, they cannot go where we go. They cannot see what we see. And even within the systems that exist, to get information to the leaders, the processes and the communication systems that we use, people filter the information given to the executives and given to the commanders. I don't know why we do this. It doesn't make any sense. If you don't give the commanders and the executives and the leaders of the world real information, then you can't ask them to make a real decision. So we understand that the bureaucratic nature of government is always a problem. I am not the first one to understand this. I will not be the last. So I defend our ability to be independent and self-funded. The way we're able to make ourselves attractive to the governments and to the militaries for the test is very simple. We have a unique financial model associated with this test that allows the test to earn money as it's being reviewed. And the way we did that was we took a very simple mentality that is overlooked by the mathematical, financial, and scientific community. What we're proposing is very simple. We challenge conventional wisdom, and directly we say to the United States and the Russian Federation, we believe we found a unique system. The system's designed to allow it to pay for itself, and it's based on a very simple mentality. We already understand that you will always have some variant of a deterrent to keep one side balanced against the other. We all agree that the nuclear fire upon this earth is a bad idea. So what do you do about it? Your treaties say that you want to reduce the arms. You're going to replace it with another variant of a weapon, that's fine. That's the nature of political and military force. What we're proposing is very simple. The reason that we understand you can't remove the nuclear weapons is based on a very basic observation. You can't accurately monitor the materials and the technology associated with the historical data set that allows people to produce these weapons. The scientists and the contractors that you have, whatever realms they work in, they don't have the luxury of seeing the whole world. What they do is they see condensed versions of data, and they got their reports and their systems and their networks, and it's so complicated nobody can keep up with it. So what we're proposing is very simple. We acknowledge that you must have a way to track technology. However, you must consider for a moment that the idea that you're telling the world, go out there and make the world a better place, you know, you got to remember why they're after the weapons. And I think we forget that sometimes. If you put all your marbles in one corner of a table and there's 100 people sitting around the table and you walk away from the table, somebody's probably going to steal one of your marbles. And that's the mentality that you're using right now. And what we're proposing is the science exists to allow people to have real-time data and not this simulated stuff that you're trying to get now. If you increase the integrity of the wired lines upon the planet, you've accomplished two things. The first being you get to reduce the microwave emissions from the planet. They're bad, and your scientists know it. The infrastructure that's been deployed around the world, you know, you got cables run everywhere, copper and all the metal cables, and you've got all the fiber optic cables, and you got all the satellites, and you got all these towers, and you got all these radios, and you got so much stuff out there you don't even know what you have anymore. Hell, if you had to do an audit of what was in the United States, it would take you 10 years to audit what's there. I don't care what kind of database you got. How many of those towers actually work? You say, well, you got ways to monitor all of that. We're just not that smart. You know, we're not. We can be. And the way we can be is we step back and we say, all right, materials that produce nuclear weapons, they're used in other industries. So you can't really control that industry. That's wrong, because the same metals and the materials are used in other things. You know, you've got nuclear medicine, you've got nuclear power facilities. This race for energy is all bullshit anyway. You're sticking to the fossil fuels just because you can't get your technology out there fast enough. And we believe that the number one cause of the economic and the political and the military dependency upon the old ways, which is a very simple mentality. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. Old school military is hard to convince to do anything. Old school politicians, hard to teach to do anything. But you're learning. Do you remember in your lifetime you never thought you'd hold a cell phone in your hand? I go back to the day I was born, and there's people out there older than me. Everything that's in front of us now was science fiction. But it's real. And I happen to believe that the number one risk to society is the dependency upon this nuclear threat. Why do we create it? Don't know. It's what the government said do. It's not my concern. What my concern is, if you're going to track the technology, then you need to deploy a system that can actually track the technology. If you're going to have a military deterrent system that says, you know, you can't come over here and kick our people or we're going to kick you, I mean, you know, that's a pretty base mentality.
we speak about being civilized, but the only way we can negotiate is to blow people up. I mean, I thought we were a lot more progressed than that. Old habits die hard. History has shown that, However, if you look at the lessons we learned about ways to deploy systems that allow people to be effective and to contribute to society, more times than not throughout history of many civilizations, you let the people solve the problem. The nature of regulatory systems says that you're just collecting information. And the information that you're collecting, as much as you'd like to think it's being cataloged and indexed and protected, it's not. It's being bought and sold. They're already inside the wire, if a military mentality matters. There's no security in your communications. None. Zilch. Zero. None. There isn't any. You gave it away a long time ago. And you didn't give it to some secret society or people that are gonna break the planet. You just weren't that smart. You were so busy based on the fear of these weapons, you just did whatever you had to do. That's what the statistical data says. If you can find real data, most of it's been sterilized, hidden, locked up, sold. For what? Something that doesn't make people afraid anymore. They somehow think the monetary object in their pocket is security. I suppose that's a way to control society. But I just thought we were better than that. And so what you do is you go back and say, let's just upgrade the communication system. And in your ability to upgrade the communication system, based on some pretty novel processes that we will introduce further in this video, you bring a balance to the world. And that, not as someone that needs to be in control of everything, but as leaders that understand, which is probably, at least from a perspective an analytic would have. That's all we're after anyway, is to understand how not to make people angry, not to have them go nuts. And how do you do that? You gotta let them talk. You can't put all these expensive throwaway objects in their hands that take all their money and then promise them an education and they don't have one. So what do you do about it? Put them to work. You talk about population explosions and food and all this. It's all bullshit. If you've ever traveled around the world, actually got out there and drove up and down the roads and climbed the mountains and flew across the rivers and streams, you do the square meter calculations on the number of people versus the number of meters on the planet. What do I know? I'm just simply saying, if you go back and you increase the speed of the technology, you accurately record the data and protect it based on an equitable distribution of data sets that belong to the countries, then what you have is a system that actually invites itself to an economic model that doesn't exist. If the data crosses a border, somebody gets paid. If the data crosses a county, somebody gets paid. That's where you're trying to go. Well, you can't do that until you put the system in place. Transactional based monetary payments for clicks? Who is the idiot that dreamed that up? Think about how many times people are clicking a mouse every day. Well, evidently somebody understands the same model that we're talking about, where if you take a penny a day and double it, then you've got money to pay for itself. But where do those funds go? They don't go back to the people. So maybe you just upgrade the communication system and you look at the weaknesses in the existing system. How do you do that? That's what our proposal is about.
The team is in fact the United States, the Russian Federation, and Ukraine. The reason I choose to do this is very simple. The United States and Russia are directly responsible for the fear that has gripped the planet. We were part of the Cold War creation. The things that happened in Yalta were wrong. Don't know why. It's not my problem. History says that most likely it was a plan from before. Don't know why that happened either. All I know is that if you looked the leaders of the Russian Federation and the United States in the face and you said to them, "What are you doing for Japan or Ukraine?" they could not answer you. All I know is if you ask them, "Do you really want to blow up your own kids?" they're going to tell you no. The advisors, these wonderful people that must manage the threat of the world, they should be smarter than what they're doing. They don't give the leaders the good information, and these leaders make bad decisions, and then we beat them up for it. Ukraine is in the middle of this test for a reason. They are a natural divide. Not to mention, they were pretty much the heart of the nuclear arms race between the two countries anyway, if for no other reason than a visible show of force between the nations. But within that, per capita, the smartest people on the planet per square meter are in the country of Ukraine. And they're in trouble. And they're in trouble because of the effects of the nuclear winter that fell across this place. And that's why Ukraine is facing the problems it's facing. You can talk about economic policies and oppression and everything else you want to talk about with bad government. But I ask you, what would you do if you were the president of a country that's been affected by the world's worst nuclear disaster? Doesn't make any sense to me. But that's what we've done. There has been evidence that suggests that somewhere within the military-industrial complex of the world, that the accident was intentional. I do not believe it was supported by a particular government. However, I believe there is data that suggests that it was in fact intentional, if only to maintain the perpetual fear. How do you solve all of these problems? Again, I'm telling you, I'm not trying to give a political position. I'm simply stating what I understand. And what I do understand is that in addition to the three countries on the screen, there's only one other country that really understands, and that is Japan. The reason I do not include Japan in this test is because, quite frankly, Japan has recovered quite well from the effects of the things that it endured from the nuclear era. We rebuilt them. You know? We didn't do that for Ukraine. The Russian Federation didn't do it. The American people didn't do it. The United Nations didn't do it. We turn our back on Ukraine. We've done that so many times in history. I don't know why. Why does it matter to me? It matters to me because my daughter was born here. But more importantly, from a logistics standpoint, and I don't know how this happened this way, if you're going to deploy a global test, I need the scientific expertise of Ukraine. And I believe we have the pieces to allow that to happen. I also believe that the Russian Federation will 100% support our efforts to be an independent, based on the idea that we are creating new jobs, and that we are trying to be an independent, saying there is a better way. And I already know that my government 100% supports any endeavor that will allow for the creation of jobs and for something that is a new perspective to try and remove this gridlock upon the system. The gridlock is the communication system. It's broken, it's compromised. We knew this as early as 2001 when those buildings fell down, and we've been racing to try to fix it. There have been elements within non-legal entities around the world that have circumvented the existing hard lines. They've compromised the banking systems. They've compromised the military networks. And the leaders of the world understand these things. They just don't want to make the fear worse. And within that, I respect them very much. But as an independent that is able to move in and around all of these systems, simply as an observer, we're better than what we're doing, gentlemen. You gotta give them clean water and you gotta give them clean food. We have the ability to do that now. And the way we do that is we build a new system that takes the fear away from them. If you take the fear away from people and you give them the tools, more times than not in history, man has always excelled. There's no need for the room of fear anymore. There are scientific things in our future that if we do not address, history will repeat itself. I speak about the teams. There's the Russian team. There's 4 major contractors. And then there's 4 subcontractors. Ukrainian team, 4 major contractors and 4 subcontractors. The US team, the same thing, 4 major contractors and 4 subcontractors. I want to move into the first component design. I can sit here and talk all day about what it does and why it doesn't. The technical people on the planet that understand what they're looking at on the screen absolutely know there's a need for multispectral imaging. The technical powers that be know that there's a need for a electronic registration point for GIS data sets. They already know that it's not being done the way it should be. We've done something unique. Instead of people having to paint colored lines on roads that are seen from satellites, we decided to put in a non-invasive aerial grid that you can change the aperture and size on, which means that basically you're projecting a blue screen grid across the planet. There are some imaging technologies available from some of the wonderful satellite technologies on the planet that do very powerful things. However, we believe if you're on the ground and you introduce this grid, it serves a purpose. We also understood to eliminate targeting and tracking identification errors. One of the reasons that the systems run into a problem is if you don't introduce movement into an object that is already moving, you cannot counter the effects of that movement upon a system. You take these 4 objects and you put them together, you have a 3-dimensional environment inside of the computer. We're all racing to that. I just think I've done it a little bit faster. Why? three-dimensional planet. A commander and a leader. They already have their gaming technologies for what-if scenarios. But what if you needed to eliminate the nuclear threat? What do you need to see? You need to consolidate what you see. And the commanders need to see it. I.e., the executives need to see it. Congress, Parliament. You got to give them better tools to make decisions, gentlemen. And you got to hold them accountable. And the way you hold them accountable is you let them all see the same thing. You can't have secrets when you're trying to eliminate something that can burn the atmosphere of the planet. It's got to be open, and it's got to be transparent. It can be excluded from the general population, but it must be distributed amongst the leaders. In their ability to do that, the forces that are in place to track down people that have stolen components from the nuclear arsenal, it's easier for them to do. And the reason it's easier for them to do is because the power and the speed of the transmission for the data makes it real time. And I don't mean simulated or projected or any other variant of what you're calling real time right now. Any commander, any politician will tell you about the wait times for information and how painful and how agonizing it is for those minutes or seconds in waiting for information. And for the guys in the field, it translates into things that means life and death. And it shouldn't be that way, because we're smarter than that. If you must send these people into harm's way, make sure you know why. We don't know that anymore. How do you really do this? You gotta reduce the tolerances that you got within your system. And you really gotta go down to subatomic things, you know? 10 trillionth of an inch for your calibration grids. People will argue with me and say, well, that's too much data, Brian. It's too many points. It's redundancy. It's absolutely redundancy. Because of the data loss associated with long-term transmission of data. And file formats exist across the system. You lose a column of data here, a row of data here, a pixel of data here, and people are hurt. And a lot of people are hurt. We can't use projections anymore, gentlemen. If you don't know where you're sending one of your devices, you need to stop. And the device I speak about is not the nuclear weapon. It is, in fact, the weapon that can stop the nuclear weapon. That's what we're trying to do. The governments of the world are trying to build them, and they're wonderful people. They've got their own design, but it's absolutely incomplete. And the reason it's incomplete is we have not completed the communications interlink, and there is nothing on the planet or emerging in the future that will allow that to work effectively. What there is an existing system that lends itself to throwaway components that are eventually obsolete by the time they get through the review process. That's the military-industrial complex mentality. It's motivated by greed. Just get something on the table, get somebody to approve it, and let's move on to the next component. We can always come back to it and make more money. And in our ability to do that, we forget that you've got systems out there right now that are broke. They're absolutely broke. They don't work. And the reason we know they don't work is because the best scientists in the world have already said they don't work. But instead of being responsible people and standing up and saying, you know what, you really made a mistake and we wasted a lot of money and we're really going to fix it, we just cover it up and promote somebody for doing it. That's politics. I don't care about that. That's why we're neutral. In our ability to be a neutral with our own money, we can acknowledge all of the problems that we've seen and witnessed firsthand. And we can say, it's okay, guys. The restrictions placed upon you in a particular government or in a particular company You can't do what we've done. It's impossible. Your own analytics will tell you that. Only an independent can design a system like this. Is it for sale? Absolutely. But that's not why we're here. We're here to demonstrate the effective components. And think about designing a system that's got 13 errors in it, and we rely on it for tracking. If I built my house that way, it would fall down on my head. But we built one of the most advanced systems on the planet that are in control of some of the largest, most dangerous machines on the planet. And we said, oh, it's okay. It's not okay. People die. And they continue to die because of those 13 errors. One that died in particular, and one that I dedicate this work to, was a Navy pilot that was doing his job, and we killed him. And I'm still angry about that. As a human being, I have a right to be angry about that. But I'm not angry because of some government or some system. I'm angry because I didn't do enough. So that's what motivated me to build this. I knew 22 years ago that there were problems with the system. And so did a lot more people in a lot more powerful positions than me. What does that mean? Evidence suggests that there are commanders all the way to the White House that understood those problems. Are you gonna worry about those things? Not really. I don't want to kick a president. I think we need to stop kicking our leaders. I don't care what color he is. I don't care what his religion is. All I care about is he stands up and says, get rid of these damn things. Because there's been more than one president that has said that. The economy, the crisis. Hey, blame who's responsible. It's not the presidents. It's not the governments. It's this damn military-industrial complex that are simply trying to feed their soldiers. It's their job. So don't kick them for it. Don't kick the soldiers for doing their job. Get rid of the things that cause the fear. And then the soldiers can learn to do something else. You promised me that when I wore the uniform. You didn't train me either. So see, I know what I'm talking about firsthand. There's millions of veterans around the world. We gave our heart and soul to our government. And you didn't do us the right way. You didn't do it in Vietnam. You didn't do it in Korea. Same way in Russia. Same way in Ukraine. And it's not the government's fault. Absolutely. I would never look a government employee or government official in the face and say, you done something wrong. Because they have a hard job. And I don't want it. I just simply say to you, please listen to an independent that has moved around the planet. And understand, because of the nuclear threat, your communication systems are compromised in other ways. There's no EMP protection. It doesn't exist anymore. It did. At some point in history, it did. Scientists understood. You pop one of these bombs, and your communications are fried. Then somebody comes along and says, oh, we got better ways. No, you don't. You absolutely don't, because you didn't deploy it across the planet. What you did is you created custom solutions that allowed elite people with a lot of money to survive a problem, and you forgot about the other people. You can't do that. It goes against the nature of the Constitution of the Russian Federation. It goes against the nature of the Constitution of every country I've read, including communist countries. It's all about information, people. We've got bad information. And the ones that know, they're making billions. And they sit back and laugh at all of us. The same system. Naturally, if you're going to give it to a government or a military, you need to move it around. You need to put it in the air, you need to put it in the ground, put it on the water. So I made sure the device could do that. The next thing I did was I understood this wonderful constellation called GPS. Lets you tell you where you are with these crazy little maps on these things that you hold in your hand. People love that. And it's pretty cool. But you know what? It can't track something at Mach 5. Doesn't know how. And whatever system they're building over there as a variant of our President Reagan's wish and that we do something associated with Star Wars or SDI, they got it wrong. And they didn't get it wrong because they're wrong. They got it wrong because the politicians told them to do it wrong. If you gave the authority to the organizations responsible for eliminating the nuclear threat, it would be gone. Because they know what they're doing. You gotta stop changing their mandates. You gotta stop changing their security. You gotta stop changing their resources. These systems to stop this threat are on this planet. Give the soldiers a new job. Let them feed the people. Let them make sure they got good water. Let them make sure they got good places to live. And they're educated. And that the communication systems are structured in such a way that if it's a military object, it doesn't belong on the same network that you got a 5-year-old. You can't do that. We're doing it now, and then we turn around and say, what's wrong with the children? Well, look at the games that you give them. You teach them to blow up people. And then say, well, why do we have terrorists blowing up people? Well, I don't know. Pay attention. If a kid sits in front of a TV all day and looks at a video game that says he can blow up people, why wouldn't they grow up and want to do that? Children learn by example. And when you've oppressed their parents to a point that they're all latchkey kids, all over the world they're latchkey kids. The parents are so busy trying to find food and water and a place to stay, the kids do what they want. It's not the way I was raised. We found a way to eliminate the errors within the GPS sentences. And we actually showed it to the Defense Intelligence Agency. And you know, they treated us like a bug. They really did. We were so insulted by the time we left there. I took my mentor, he was 70 years old, man put every dime he had into my technology. We asked for a review of the technology, and they sent us to some out of the way location, and they had bad information about me, and they didn't give us the time of the day. So within that, we understood what we were saying was real. Do these things matter? They do to me. If you do all of the things we previously talked about with the system, you give the guys that use it the ability to actually use a component that they've built. Because if you don't give a custom user interface, you have a learning curve. You don't need a learning curve if you've got real-time data. You don't have to learn anything. Let them arrange the data the way they understand it. Then you don't have to train them. And your ability to do that, you're able to divert resources from training to use a system to training to do something else. And of course, the last thing we put into the component was the web-enabled technology. It's not that big of a deal anymore, but it was at the time we introduced it. What it directly means is that in conjunction with the next component I'm getting ready to introduce, you've established a secure channel directly across all levels of the executive branch, the command authorities, the field units, they're all interconnected instantly. And the way we accomplish that is we move into the next component. And we named it SciNet. It is in fact a spin on a movie. Everybody knows about this network. If you know anything about science fiction, people were afraid of that network. It's okay. I'm not. What is it? It's every lesson that I learned about how to transmit data that all the other greedy customers forgot. I said, well, why call them greedy customers? Because if I'm speaking to the government and you understand that the people that have built the technology systems on the planet associated with communications, they're government customers. That's all they are. That's just wrong. We're better than that. It's supposed to be the other way around. If you're going to build a system for a government, it should be a system for the government. But we don't do that. I can give you names. I can get myself in lawsuits in a hurry, naming off the names, dates, times, places, components, all of the ones that made the mistakes. But when you live in a perpetual environment of fear for 70 years plus, what are you going to do? Your human consciousness globally is going to reduce. Don't care. You become individuals. It is a new computer network. If for no other reason, there's only one communication system on the planet. Somebody told me, just focus on that and you got enough money and leave the world alone, Bryant. It's not who I am. I accept responsibility for what I know. Maybe I know too much. Or maybe I don't know enough. But I know if I stay an independent and I keep telling the story, somebody will hear me. The network is proprietary to each country. It does have a language-specific design for each country. It does operate at 169 terabits a second. And the reason I do that is I get rid of the line loss and the latency. And the way you do that is you establish major new trunk lines that are specifically for government and military. And then of course the technical guys are going to say to me, well, we already have that, Bryant. No, you don't. You absolutely don't. What you're doing is you're leasing things that belong to other people, and you don't have a way to audit it. You don't want your commanders to know that. You sure as hell don't want your leaders to know that, but that's what you've done. Why? Because it's easier. And typically, in a corporate structure, you're going to do what's easy. Because somebody told you to. The military-industrial complex does not answer to a country. It does not answer to a flag. It answers to the dollar. So come take our money. You know? Really. Just take our money. Stop doing the stupid things. Find your humanity. These things I'm speaking about, they're not directed at a government. They're not a threat. I'm speaking to corporate America, because I know they're the ones that's going to see this. Do you remember the times in American history when you had to guarantee that you could give back to the people before you had a right to do business? We forgot those things, gentlemen, and it's not our fault. What do you do with soldiers who don't have a ward? It's been the biggest dilemma of man. You put them to work. Well, soldiers I've met like to work. What do you get them to do? Fix the communication system. For real. You know? We've moved rivers and mountains. We've put people on the moon. And we can't feed our own people? Talk to me about leadership. I've learned leadership principles from the best people on the planet. I am an independent. Certified Iridium network enabled technology. Everybody knows what it is. Bryant figured out a way to access that fancy exotic metal. And I'm not the first one to do it. I'm sure as hell not going to be the last one. There's even more interesting models on the table. I just haven't had a chance to get the other metals in place. But if you use that iridium crystal, which is in fact what it is, you're going to move data faster than the human mind. It's normal. But if you do that, in this network design, you got to remember something. And I go back to something I talked about before. Maybe not in this discussion, but how many copies of an object are on the existing network? How do you know which one you're looking at's real? If you review the processes that you have for understanding that, and you trace it all the way upstream, you realize you don't. And you're handing that off to decision makers. You're outsourcing your security certificates? Doesn't make any sense to me. So what do we do about it? We let the customer, which is the government and which is the military, get the system that they want. Because the current military industrial complex doesn't give them what they want. They give them a variant of whatever they've got on the shelf from yesterday. They'll change the color of it, they'll change the design of it, they'll give it a new name. You gotta stop doing that. You gotta give them what they ask for. It's their money. If you give them what they ask for, it goes back to the training again. They can divert their funds from training back into their operational standards. Because that's where the training needs to go. How do you communicate with multiple countries? How do you communicate with multiple cities? You speak about your ability to do these things, and you've got this live network interfaces, all these chat rooms, all of these emails, all of this. But do you really know what's going on? If you did, then the system that we're proposing would already be in the field, and we wouldn't have any need to do an independent test to figure out how to get rid of nuclear weapons. Very simple mentality. In my experiences with traversing the vast labyrinth of the military-industrial complex, I learned one thing. They steal for a living. It's their job. They've replaced good people in the schools, and they're teaching the new generation to steal for a living. Don't know why. Until I remember the nuclear threat. You know, if you look at history, Edward M. Teller said it best. I won't quote what he says, I can't remember it this time, but go look at one of the last things he said before he died. Even Einstein said it. As wrong as he was. We move to the next component. It's a software. What did I do? Very simply, I got rid of the need for third-party certificates, and I embedded it into an operating system devi- devised, designed, and operated by the customer. And it's a single standard. And it's a standard for each customer. What is that standard? It's whatever the hell they want to be. And it's not some commercial variant. Commercial variants in government doesn't work. By design, they are a government. They deserve a different system because they have more responsibility to protect the privacy and the integrity of the data that moves through their networks, whether it be a security threat or whether it be a social need. We know these things, gentlemen, but these computer systems that we've designed do not do these things. These computer systems absolutely are contradiction to the beliefs that we hold. Why? I could sit here and talk for hours about the idea that you can't use a binary system to address a three-dimensional world. But that's what we do. We've got designs that we can't get finished that suggest that you can move the computer out of the binary world. But for the time being, these two-dimensional boxes and all of these wonderful devices that have been paid for, the most direct deterrent on the planet right now is the existing air defense platforms. You just need to network them. And you can talk about network aerial platforms all you want. You can talk about network subsystems all you want. And you can talk about how integrated and powerful the military structures are. Don't tell me, because you're talking to the wall. I've been there. I read the data. Why? Because my government said I could. Give them a unified standard. Stop listening to these lobby firms. What does that mean? Look at the organization that sets the standards for electronics. IEEE? What in the flying hell is that? You talk about security and then set your standards by a global organization that's motivated by greed. Don't talk to me about security when you can't set a policy individually within a company or individually within a country. Interconnectivity for a system, it's not a problem at all. Unless you're the politician forced to sign something that's not real, or a manager, or a procurement officer. How many times have you sat across the table as a procurement officer and you've listened to people that you knew were lying to you, but you had to cut the deal because somebody told you to? We do these things in the government. We do these things in the military. Why? I can ask that as an independent. I could make it official. We could kick out letters and demand investigations, and it would fall on deaf ears. Why? Because we've all got bad information, and all we care about is doing whatever we can do for the day, so that we're just not afraid as much as we were when we woke up the earlier hours of the day. So, well, this is not a conventional presentation. You're so busy focused on protocol, crossing the T's and dotting the I's, and who's dressed the right way, and who speaks the right way. You're forgetting what you're talking about. You're talking about something that can blow up the planet. There's no right way to talk about that. There's no formal way to talk about that. It's get rid of it. You know? How many more presidents have to die before people understand? They don't want them. How many more countries are going to be contaminated by this? How many more years are you going to defend that the cancer
while it may or may not be some variant strain of something that was on the planet before that, it's absolutely a direct result of this nuclear winter we've spread across this planet. And then you've compounded it with this increased need for deploying these throwaway systems in the microwave spectrum. Go count the number of microwave transmission points on the planet. Plot them on a map and look at them. Then plot your temperature rise and fall. You seed in the clouds to reduce the effects of the radiation. You got hot spots everywhere. Unified programming standards. Deprogram your soldiers, program your software, put them to work. Why? You put them in a custom box and you go out there and you do an audit of what you have. You get rid of the things that have been compromised. Replace it with system standards that are yours. And you can only do that when you establish a single standard for what you're going to move around in. They did it in World War II. Look at the little Jeep. You know? It's an amazing business model. How many of those things did they produce? And they were really cool. Didn't cost a lot of money, but they were really cool at what they did. We learned years later that they were kind of dangerous, and they introduced other platforms similar to the Jeep. But hey, if it works, why fix it? Get your people in the field. That's all you got to do. Get them out there. But if you got to send them out there to do the audits and do the surveys and to replace the components and to put the new lines in, you might want to make sure you can afford to do that. So you mobilize them. Last I remember, soldiers love to go to the field. You know? Put them to work. That's what you're paying them for. Used to work when I wore a uniform, but you don't do that anymore. You let some contractor do it for them. That's your idea of making a better soldier. Okay, I respect that. What do I know? But why are you not protecting the soldier? Why are you not getting rid of the nuclear threat? Because they're the first ones that's going to feel it. So it's a contradiction in terms. As long as that nuclear threat remains, you cannot meet your mandate to protect the soldier. And these people that run this military industrial complex, they know these things, and they hold you hostage as a result of it. I'm not doing that. I'm an independent. Move to the next component. What is it? It's my version of command and control system. There's a lot of them out there. We listen to the generals and the privates and the congressmen and the mayors and the commanders all over the world, even in the Russian Federation, even in Ukraine. Why? There are no borders. You know? There's only lack of information. If you got to send them out there and they got to fight, you might want to make sure they got the right information. If you do the analysis of the wars that have been running around the world right now, you still ain't got it right. Systems are broke, gentlemen. You keep pouring money after a lost cause. Say, well, it's war. What the hell are we fighting for?
Because we're too stupid to go teach somebody you don't have to fight? Too many secrets. You think that when everybody got afraid of Microsoft and the United States government said we'll cut you up in pieces if you don't cut a deal with us, you think that anybody was not surprised when it became Google? I mean, everybody knows that's a defense network, and that's cool. Why don't you name it that? And why don't you put the kids to work? Intelligence? It's a contradiction in terms. We're not doing intelligent things. I've earned the right to say these things, no matter what you think of me. I know within the halls of the Pentagon or the White House or the Kremlin or in Kiev or any other country, they're waiting for an independent. Just give them a different direction to go. And I'm not the answer. I'm only an option. Specifically, the component called MTech addresses all of the problems we learned from the other systems. You put those guys in the field, they're really uncomfortable. Don't care what you think you're doing with your militarization standards. They're really uncomfortable. I know. I've talked to them. I've been in the machines. You could do better. Why? Because they are soldiers. So stop contradicting yourself. Make them comfortable when they must go in harm's way. And of course, most of the soldiers, they're going to say, well, they treat me fine. No, they're not. They're living in fear too, just like the rest of us. You'd say, well, how does this stop the nuclear threat? It's not hard to understand. If you have a global mentality to increase the performance of a network, and you allow for a three-dimensional radar picture with automated tracking routines in a laboratory environment, as the technology progresses, the ability to dismantle the system and keep the soldiers working becomes easier, because you're communicating in larger areas, you're deploying more resources, you're not lost in red tape, you're not buried in bureaucratic process, you're not lost in the language barrier, you're not lost in the regulatory barriers. You gotta wire the planet if you want to run the planet. Who runs the planet? People out there growing the food to make sure you don't go hungry. They run the planet. Imagine being so powerful that you can build a thing that can blow up the world. And you're so smart that you can build a space station, but you can't keep a baby from dying in the street. You ever thought about what the average human being thinks about what the policy of the world actually means? Does anybody ever think about it anymore? We kick our presidents We should be ashamed. We make our politicians fight. No, we don't. It's not who we are in any country. Everybody says the world's gone crazy, the world's gone mad. Remember the magazine Mad? Mutually assured destruction, right? Okay. I don't want my children to live in that environment, sir. Is it okay if I ask you that I think I'm man enough to give you a solution? Even if I'm wrong. Doesn't matter. Why? It's not going to cost you anything. Just paper. However, if somebody doesn't tell us yes, it's going to cost us all. Because there's some idiot out there that knows how to build these things. And there's idiots out there that don't like America and don't like Russia and don't like Ukraine. And they're organized. And they're not the terrorist threat that you're chasing. They're inside the halls of the Pentagon. They're inside the halls of the Kremlin. They're all over the planet. And they're pissed off. Don't misunderstand me. I am no threat to anybody. I love my country and I love this world. I can't do any more than what I've done. I've built a global deployment model. I've designed the components. I've assembled the team requirements. And I've found the money. What do I need? It's not rocket science. You got an entire diplomatic corps in 3 countries. All they got to do is sit down at a table and say, let's do this. 3 signatures on a piece of paper, and a 60-month construction cycle starts. And you say, well, why did I say 2013? Because I figure it's going to take you that long to ask questions, because you're just not that smart anymore. You try to hide the truth because some political environment, you try to discredit somebody. It's a contradiction in terms. You tell us, go be whatever you want to be. Remember those words. I just did what my government said I could do. Be all you can be, right? The record shows that in the face of all of this, we're just better than what we're doing. I thank you for listening to this hour and 20 minutes worth of me talking. Most people say to me, why do you talk so much? How many hours would you talk if you were trying to get the attention of 3 countries and you didn't know how?